Hi everyone, I'm Jordan Rolfus from Beagle Rampant Productions, and as you guys may or may not already know, I typically try to reserve the month of November to talk about opera or romantic things, and this year I don't have a whole lot of videos prepared. In fact, I just have one video prepared for Opera Month this year, and it doesn't even have a lot of substance to it, but it's something that I thought would be really fun to make, and I wanted to go ahead and do this just to have a little bit of fun. Today, I am going to rank all of the Wagner operas in terms of my faves to my least faves. So, yeah, I can't imagine that this video would have much interest for really anyone except for, well, me. But, I thought it would be fun to do, so I'm going to go ahead and make it. If someone out there is watching and has some opinions on this, cool, that'd be really cool. And if no one ends up seeing this movie video thing at all, then, well, I'm none the poorer for the fact. But if you are hanging out with me, sit back, relax, we're gonna totally nerd out about Wagner, and I'm gonna give you the tea on my faves and least favorite Richard Wagner operas. So before we go ahead and jump into actually discussing my favorite and least favorite Wagner operas, I thought it would be kind of helpful to maybe discuss a little bit about how we classify Richard Wagner's operas. So, most musical scholars like to put the early operas of Die Feen, Das Liebesverbot, and Rienzi in kind of their own category, the early operas category. And typically those operas are not part of the Bayreuth canon. You're not going to see them at the Bayreuth Festival in Germany every year, and Wagner had very low regards for Das Liebesverbot and for Rienzi. For Die Feen, which was his first actual completed opera, it debuted after his death, and he never really spoke out against it. He never really condemned or railed against it, but he didn't really fight for it too much once he started developing his later works. When he wrote it, he spoke kindly enough about it, but by and large, he didn't really fight for it too much once he got his career going. And then the scholars move on to the Romantic era, including the operas of The Flying Dutchman, Tannhäuser, and Lohengrin. And then we have the music dramas, which include Tristan und Isolde, Die Meistersinger, and the operas of the Ring cycle, Das Rheingold, Die Walküre, Siegfried, and Götterdämmerung. So the question is, how do we actually go about classifying the operas of the Ring cycle? Do we look at them as parts of a greater whole, kind of following with the principle of Gestalt, where the whole is better than the sum of its parts? And that would also kind of go in line with the concept that Wagner himself perfected with the creation of the Bayreuth Festival House, the Gesamtkunstwerk, the total work of art. If we look at each individual opera of the Ring cycle as part of a larger, more sweeping work, then that definitely has... That would get a little weird once I start my actual ranking process here. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Wagner definitely would have been pleased with the idea of the Gestalt and the Gesamtkunstwerk in regarding his operas for the Ring cycle, but by and large, you can jump in, you can see Götterdämmerung without having seen the rest of the operas in the Ring cycle and totally be up to date. You will not be lost or confused about what's happening. And Wagner was very specific and purposeful in writing and developing all of these operas, Götterdämmerung, Siegfried, and Die Walküre. You can jump into any point of the Ring cycle and enjoy it immensely without having to witness any of the other parts, so it really is interesting, and I will jump back to this topic a little bit once I start my actual ranking list here. So, by and large, that's how the musical scholars sort Wagner's work, but I, big scholar like me, view Wagner's operas a little bit differently. In the early period, I still have Die Feen and Das Liebesverbot, and then I have a transitional period, which includes Rienzi, and yeah, because Rienzi, you still kind of feel Wagner's presence in Rienzi. There's a lot of Meyerbeer going on, a lot of Meyerbeer influence, and maybe some Beethoven and von Weber going on in Rienzi, but you can tell Wagner is developing his voice in Rienzi, so we're at a very clear transition in the composer's repertoire here. So that's why I'm putting Rienzi at the start of Wagner's transitional period. And then we go into Der Fliegende Holländer, The Flying Dutchman, and then Tannhäuser as part of the transition, because I think is actually his last number opera. A number opera is an opera that is kind of divided up by individual arias. A lot of the work from Meyerbeer and Rossini and Verdi, they fall pretty nicely into the number opera category. And Wagner, all of his stuff from Tannhäuser before, a lot of that would definitely qualify as number operas. And Tannhäuser, he does it so seamlessly, too. It's like, these are clearly different numbers throughout the opera, but it's just done so seamlessly and absolutely masterfully. And then after Tannhäuser, we have Lohengrin, which is the point where Wagner is no longer writing number operas. And that feels weird when I listen to Lohengrin. So that's why I'm putting Lohengrin at the end of Wagner's transitional period, and this also matches up with the time that Wagner announced he will never write operas again. He will instead write musical dramas. So I think, big scholar like me, I think my analysis of putting Lohengrin at the end of a transitional period is pretty on point here. And my next period, I just simply call that Wagner's Wolf period, because let's be real, what other word are you going to use to describe the period that has the Ride of the Valkyries? Wolf really is the best term for this section of Wagner's repertoire. This is where we get all of the things that we know and love Wagner for. And, of course, I know some of you in the comments are going to probably say, but the Bridal March is from your transitional opera of Lohengrin. True, but, interestingly enough, back in the day on the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, there was a question about who wrote the Bridal March, the famous Here Comes the Bride suite. And Wagner, of course, was one of the choices. You have to give the actual correct choice on a show like that. You can't just have them all be wrong choices and expect the contestant to fumble through best how they can. It doesn't really work like that. And the contestant actually had to use the phone a friend lifeline. And he called up his friend, who was a pretty good musical expert, but he said, oh no, that couldn't have been Wagner because it's much too serene and melodic. It's nothing like the Ride of the Valkyries or the immolation scene from Götterdämmerung. So, yeah, and the contestant, of course, got that wrong. And they kept mispronouncing his name on the show, too. They kept calling him Wagner, but that's, Wagner is a very common last name in my area of Cincinnati, and if you have that last name, you're going to get called Wagner in this town. There's just kind of no way to avoid that there, but what was I actually talking about? Yeah, Wagner's Wolf period. So yes, the Wolf period is where we see all of the things that we really know Wagner for. The quintessential Wagner comes in this Wolf period. And then, for Parsifal, I actually have Parsifal starting a new spiritual period. Parsifal is a work that is very much unlike the others in Wagner's career, but there's also a little bit of uneasiness there. It's like Wagner is kind of exploring with something and finding a new voice, a new idea, new themes, new concepts to explore, but there's definitely some uneasiness there, at least I think, in Parsifal. So it's a shame Wagner didn't live longer so that we could see more operas in the spiritual period. That would have been, like, imagine if he kept going on in a spiritual period, like the Götterdämmerung version of Parsifal would have been like. That is really, really cool to kind of speculate upon. So, yeah, that kind of, I think knowing a little bit about Wagner's musical history and his repertoire would maybe help us make sense of our tier listing here. And it sounds like my neighbors... What are my neighbors doing out there? Are they mowing their lawn? Dude, it's November. There is no need to mow your lawn in November. Although I mowed my lawn the other day, but... Is anyone still watching this video, by the way? I mean, this is going to be a chill video, and I'm not expecting anyone to actually watch it, but let's go on to our tier list. And before we go on to the tier list, it's also important to note that this tier list is what we would call weighted. It's kind of, so like the A range in Wagner would be like an A+ or an S ranking in any other composer's repertoire, because I think Wagner is the greatest composer that ever lived. So an S from Wagner would be the greatest masterpieces of classical music ever written, and maybe like a C from Wagner would be like a high B, maybe even a low A for some other composers. So it is important to kind of bear this weighting system in mind here. So, the user Wagner 2.0 actually developed a list of the Bayreuth canon operas, and of course I'm doing all of the operas in my rankings, so you can go ahead and add images to someone's list, and I did that for Rienzi, Die Fein, and Das Liebesverbot. But we're ready to jump into this ranking here. In my opinion, on the S ranking, the masterpieces of classical music in and of itself. S ranking, we have Das Rheingold. I adore Das Rheingold. It's fast, it moves quickly, it hits hard, it's powerful. I absolutely love Albrecht. He is a wonderful villain. I maybe relate to Albrecht a little more than I probably should. Oh my god, does this make me an incel? Because, let's be real, Albrecht was the original incel. But also, the Rhine Maidens kind of deserved what they got, so, I mean... well, there goes everyone's opinion on me. Not like it had much to fall from, you know? And after Das Rheingold, I am going to put Tannhäuser right next to it in the S ranking. I absolutely love Tannhäuser. It is such a reflective and spiritual work, but it's also really powerful with some amazing use of chorus and melody. Wolfram is a wonderful friend, and the theme of love is just absolutely tragic. Tannhäuser is some really great stuff there, so Tannhäuser definitely earns its spot in my S ranking here. I will say, though, with Tannhäuser, avoid the Paris version. Wagner re-edited Tannhäuser a whole bunch of times. He did an edit for Paris. Half of the second act is cut out. Don't listen to the Paris version of Tannhäuser, guys. Just don't. I mean, not that, like, the Paris version is bad. It's just half of the second act is missing, guys. Like, and there's beautiful stuff in the second act. Like, my gosh, you know, it would really be like if you were I don't know, trying to have Christmas or something, and I went to your house and took your Christmas tree and said, try having Christmas. I don't know, Christmas is coming. I decorated the outside of my lawn with Christmas stuff the other day. God bless you guys if you really are still watching this video, but yeah, so my S ranking for Wagner, Das Rheingold, Tannhäuser, best works from Wagner, some of the best works in all of the history of classical music. In the A range, we are going to put Götterdämmerung. It has it all. It really does have it all. It's everything you could ever hope for in a Wagner opera. And right next to Götterdämmerung, where are you, buddy? Where are you? We're going to put Siegfried. Siegfried is actually the first Wagner opera that I saw. I was a wee little baby, and PBS was airing their broadcast of the Metropolitan Opera, and it was time for Siegfried, so I was sitting in Raggy's lap. I had a bottle of milk ready to go. He had a bottle of something that was not milk, and we just sat and to hear him tell the tale. And I actually do remember this a little bit from my baby years. I was transfixed and watching the entire opera. I wasn't falling asleep or fussing around. My mind and my attention was focused on what was happening on the screen. So yeah, I definitely remember that performance. So it was pretty good too. Yeah, I think James Levine was the conductor. James Levine, he was one of the legit conductors. His passing was definitely tragic. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm actually going to put Die Meistersinger right next to Siegfried. Kind of interesting, but, Die Meistersinger is actually the longest opera ever written, and there's a lot of good stuff in the longest opera ever written. Go figure, You'd have to be a special kind of a screw-up to have the longest opera ever and not have a lot of absolute bangers in it, and there's a lot to love in Die Meistersinger. It's the only mature comedy that Wagner had written. Das Liebesverbot, of course, the early opera, is a comedy through and through, and we'll get to Das Liebesverbot, don't worry. But yeah, I think Die Meistersinger definitely earns its spot in the A range. Alrighty, so I think I maybe want to anger some people. Do I want to anger some people and put Rienzi ahead of Parsifal? Go ahead, write your angry comments. And, okay, yeah, those comments are a little angry, so I'm going to swap them. The reason for that I would have put Rienzi ahead of Parsifal probably would have boiled down to overtures. I prefer the overture to Rienzi to the overture to Parsifal, so yeah, that probably would have been what would have edged it out, and I really like the Santo Spirito battle cry, but if I'm being really fair here, Rienzi went through several cuts and edits, and there have been times on certain recordings I've heard something really great in Rienzi, but I'm not able to find it consistently throughout all of the different recordings. With Parsifal, I know I'm going to hear them entering the Grail Hall. I know I'm going to hear Titurel's funeral march. I know I'm going to hear the Flower Maiden chorus. I know the great stuff of Parsifal will always 100% happen. I don't necessarily know that all the time with Rienzi. I do also prefer the conclusion to Rienzi to the conclusion to Parsifal. Yeah, I just love the burning the Roman capital and, Adriano rushing in to try to save Irene. Like, that was some pretty good stuff there. But if I'm being absolutely honest and fair with Wagner, you guys, and myself, Parsifal probably should edge out Rienzi a little bit here. And then that might do it for the A range. For the B range, I'm going to start it off with Die Walküre. So, do you guys remember how I mentioned that the operas of the Ring cycle were written in different times in Wagner's life. So it's kind of interesting that Die Walküre is actually part of the same series as Das Rheingold, Siegfried, and Götterdämmerung. For me, a lot of the first and second act feel very kind of slow. It doesn't have the same wolf. There's that word again, wolf. What better word to describe Wagner than wolf? Come on, guys. But wolf, it doesn't have the power, gravitas, wolf that Das Rheingold, Siegfried, or Götterdämmerung seem to have all throughout those pieces. That being said, the third act with the Ride of the Valkyries and Wotan's Farewell absolutely slaps, and I adore the third act of Die Walküre. So, yeah. In fact, the third act is so good it probably should be in the A range, but there's a lot in the second act that doesn't really fire me up as much as it probably should, so yeah. Oh, Lohengrin's down here, too. Yeah. Almost forgot about you, Lohengrin. Well, I guess that's my way of saying we need to put Lohengrin right here. Again, I view Lohengrin as kind of a transitional opera. I love the chorus bits. The choral pieces in Lohengrin are absolutely amazing. Wow. Sometimes it can definitely bring a little tear to your eye. It's just the power and the excitement. You can really feel the people's excitement in the Lohengrin chorus, so that's definitely something Wagner nailed beautifully. But there's also a feeling throughout Lohengrin of it's not a number opera, and this is kind of the first time Wagner wrote something that was not a number opera. So there's definitely an element of Wagner not really knowing how to stitch everything together so beautifully. There's definite gaps, and an exciting moment just kind of stops and it doesn't fade too naturally into the next thing. So that might be why I put Lohengrin in the B range like this. Flying Dutchman also, and keep in mind, guys, a B from Wagner is probably a high A for a lot of other composers. And my next thing in the B range for Wagner, though, would be Flying Dutchman. Really great opera. Love the overture. Love the Sailor's chorus. That is absolutely stellar. I love me some Sailor chorus, but I don't know. Maybe I just don't like Eric. Like, that could really, it could just boil down to me not liking Eric as a character, and he might be enough to stick. I think he's useless. No shade. I'm sorry, Eric, don't mean to throw shade, but I'm just going to go ahead and throw some shade at you here. So, and I know I am going to get a lot of smack for this one, but in the C range, I'm going to put Tristan und Isolde. Keep in mind, a C from Wagner is probably like an A-, B+ for any other composer. I know Tristan is often cited as Wagner's most beloved opera, and one of Friedrich Nietzsche absolutely loved Tristan und Isolde, but I don't know, it's not, I don't think it's a bad opera, it's far from it. There is some beautiful music all throughout Tristan und Isolde. It just, it just doesn't, of all of the operas in Wagner's Wolf period, it just doesn't excite me as much. Just a personal preference, I don't know. And I wish I could... Tiermaker.com doesn't seem to let me move this further along, but I really do want to put Die Feen more in, like, the C range. I think Die Feen is a good opera. I just maybe don't think it's a good Wagner opera. it's a perfect opera to hear on a Sunday spring afternoon when everything is in full bloom, the sun is shining, and you're maybe ready to have a nice tea after church, a nice brunch with tea after your morning church service or something. That's the kind of vibe I get from Die Feen, and again, Wagner didn't really throw shade at Die Feen like he did to Rienzi, which he straight up called repugnant. But he never really fought for Die Feen either. Die Feen rarely gets performed, hardly ever, that is to say, and it debuted after his death. It's kind of Wagner's forgotten opera, even though it was his first completed one. So, yeah, I mean, I do like it. It's just, if you didn't tell me that it was written by Wagner, I would have never have guessed. It could have very easily have been von Weber, Meyerbeer, maybe not even as heavy as Meyerbeer, Mozart or Beethoven. It definitely gives me more vibes like that than it does of Wagner, but I think Die Feen, good opera and a necessary step for Wagner to become the wolf composer. There's that word. Let's normalize using wolf when describing Wagner. So, we only have one opera left, and we only have one tier left. Wagner 2.0, who made this list on tiermaker.com, didn't provide an F ranking, and I agree with that. I'm not going to put anything in the F ranking, but I'm sure going to put Das Liebesverbot in the D ranking. Wagner himself called this opera a youthful indiscretion, and when he presented it to King Ludwig II of Bavaria, he sent it with an apology note. So that goes to show how much Wagner thought of it. And let's be real, the only reason why I have this in a D range and not a straight up F range is because I really like the overture. That is a cool overture. And I like the introduction to the carnival. Aside from that, Das Liebesverbot is, as Wagner said, a youthful indiscretion. It's a young man desperately trying to make his way in a world that is overcrowded, and essentially Wagner was trying to make his way in the Hollywood of his time, and Das Liebesverbot he probably thought was going to be his ticket to do that, and it was an absolute disaster. And I'm not going to talk too much more about Das Liebesverbot. Hit the subscribe button. It's going to be my video for Opera and Romance Month for next year. I have to study and talk about Das Liebesverbot. There's a lot of insincerity throughout Das Liebesverbot. It's a very insincere opera. It earns its D rating. But that overture does slap, though, so the overture and the carnival save it. Aside from that, though, I think that pretty much does our ranking of all of Richard Wagner's operas. So, thank you guys so much for watching. If you are still watching this video, God bless you if you're watching this video, because I was very casual, and let's be real, I kind of threw this one together real quick. So, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. You guys know you're the best fans of any YouTuber in the world, so like, comment, and subscribe. We've got a lot of fun things coming up on the channel, and we'll love to see you more. Hang out some more. Let's be a family. Oh, guys, also, subscribe to the Germania Society of Cincinnati's YouTube channel. It's Germania-Society in YouTube. I'm doing the videos for that channel as well, and I hope I do better for them than I do for Beagle Rampant. I'm allowed to suck on Beagle Rampant, but I would feel bad if I sucked on, you know, the non-profit German Heritage Organization's YouTube channel. So, yeah, subscribe to Beagle Rampant, and then subscribe to the Germania Society of Cincinnati. Yeah, I do their videos now, so yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. You're the best fans of any YouTuber in the world, and we have the holiest season coming up, so yeah. We're gonna have lots of fun, guys, and I'll catch you later. Bye!